All right, today we're diving into what might just be one of the most catastrophic, bewildering, and, let's be honest, worst Thursdays in the entire history of the universe. So, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy kicks things off by just completely shattering our sense of scale. It tells us that space is so mind-bogglingly big that the distance to your local drugstore is, and I'm quoting here, just peanuts. You gotta keep that crazy contrast in mind. But for all that talk about the vastness of space, our story doesn't start out there in some distant nebula. Nope. It begins with something much, much smaller. A house. And a man named Arthur Dent, who was about to find out that Thursdays were a day he could just never get the hang of. And this is where things get really clever. You see, Arthur's very ordinary, very frustrating problem with his house was about to become a tiny mirror image of a much, much bigger problem, which brings us to a tale of two demolitions. So Arthur's very bad Thursday kicks off when he wakes up, probably with a bit of a hangover, and sees a big yellow bulldozer parked in his garden. He knew about the plans to build a bypass, sure, but he kind of just figured it would all sort itself out. It did not. And this is where the genius satire of the whole thing really clicks. Arthur's arguing that the demolition notice for his house was impossible to find. It was in a locked filing cabinet, in a cellar, behind a door with a sign that said, "Beware of the leopard." And that perfectly mirrors the bigger picture. The demolition notice for planet Earth was also on public display. It was just 50 light years away on Alpha Centauri. It's this hilarious takedown of how bureaucracy just grinds on, whether you can get to the paperwork or not. So while Arthur is literally lying in the mud to protect his home, his friend Ford Prefect shows up. But here's the thing about Ford. He's not just some ordinary guy. He's actually a field researcher for the Hitchhiker's Guide, and after being stranded on Earth for 15 years, he picks this exact moment to reveal his true identity. After dragging a totally bewildered Arthur to the pub for 3 quick pints, which Ford calls a muscle relaxant, he drops the bombshell. This isn't just about Arthur's house getting knocked down anymore. So the world is ending. What do you do? How do you possibly survive something like that? Well, this is where the Hitchhiker's Toolkit comes in handy. These are the absolute essentials for any interstellar traveler facing imminent doom. First step, you have the guide itself. Think of it like the ultimate Kindle, containing pretty much all knowledge. But you know why it outsold the fancier Encyclopedia Galactica? Well, it's slightly cheaper, and more importantly, it has these 2 words printed in large, friendly letters right on the cover. Don't panic. In a universe this absurd, that is the single best piece of advice you could ever get. Next, and maybe the most iconic item of all, is the towel. The guide goes on and on about the towel. You can wrap it around you for warmth, lie on it, use it for hand-to-hand combat. You can even wave it as a distress signal. But the real secret is psychological. Anyone who sees that a hitchhiker has their towel will automatically assume they have everything else too. And finally, how do you solve the whole language barrier problem? Simple. The babblefish. Ford literally shoves this small, yellow, leech-like creature into Arthur's ear, and suddenly, the gurgling sounds from aliens become perfect English. The guide also notes that the existence of something so ridiculously useful is seen by some philosophers as the final proof of the non-existence of God. It's a whole thing. Now, they managed to hitch a ride off Earth just in time. But who picked them up? Well, saviors is probably not the right word. They found themselves on a Vogan constructor ship, and let me tell you, that is not a place you want to be. The guide does not pull any punches when it comes to Vogons. Just imagine the most miserable civil servant you can think of. Then make them mean and completely heartless. These are beings who wouldn't save their own grandmothers without the proper forms signed in triplicate. And on top of all that, they're poets. In fact, they write the 3rd worst poetry in the entire universe. And here is a small sample of that very poetry. The Vogon captain forces Arthur and Ford to listen to his work, and the experience is so awful it causes actual physical pain. The only thing worse than the poetry itself is the punishment for not liking it. So their options are pretty straightforward. Tell the captain his poem was wonderful, or die in the vacuum of space. Arthur gives it his best shot. He really tries to flatter him, but it's no good. The captain sentences them to be thrown out of the ship. Being tossed out of an airlock into deep space really should be the end of the story. But in this universe, it's just the setup for an absolutely improbable rescue, the grand finale to their very bad Thursday. As they're being dragged away, Ford calmly tells Arthur that they'll have about 30 seconds of consciousness once they're ejected. 30 seconds. The odds of another ship just happening to fly by and scoop them up in that tiny, tiny window of time are, to put it mildly, not good. How not good? Well, the odds are precisely 2 to the power of 276,709 to 1. Against. Which, in a staggering coincidence, is also the telephone number of a flat in Islington where Arthur once met a really nice girl at a party. And yet, against those impossible odds, with just 1 second to spare, they're rescued, plucked right out of the void. How? How is that even possible? Because they were picked up by the one ship in the universe powered by the infinite improbability drive. It's a brand new technology that makes the impossibly unlikely not just possible, but an everyday reality. It works by having the ship pass through every single point in the universe all at once. Yeah, try not to think about it too hard. And the ship that rescued them, it's called the Heart of Gold, and it was just stolen by Ford's semi-cousin, the two-headed, three-armed, ridiculously charismatic ex-president of the galaxy, Zaphod Beeblebrox. Of course it was. Which leaves us with one final thought. In a universe where a spaceship runs on improbability, what's really the difference between a wild coincidence and the fundamental laws of physics? Maybe, on a truly bad Thursday, there's no difference at all.